Hey, what's up guys? Brian Kelly here from Zombie Guitar. This is going to be part one of a multi-part series where we deep dive into the harmonic minor scale. So you may be used to using the harmonic minor scale in the context of just a basic minor key or even a major key for that matter, because the harmonic minor scale is only a one-note difference from that of the natural minor scale, as you're going to see in this video. But this video is not going to be about that context. This video is going to be about using the harmonic minor scale and creating chords from the scale, otherwise known as harmonizing with the scale. And then we're going to use these new chords to actually create chord progressions that is part of the harmonic minor scale. So it's not going to be written in a major key. It's not going to be written in a minor key. It's going to be in the harmonic minor scale key, if you want to call it that. And then when you have this new chord progression, you can solo over top of it using the harmonic minor scale as your soloing framework, and you can get some really creepy, some really dark, some really exotic type of sounds that you may not be used to. So that's what this series of lessons is going to be about. So part one here, we're just going to derive the chords. We're going to make a comparison to the basic major keys and minor keys, and then part two, we're going to go deeper. So let's get started. So let's first take a look at what the harmonic minor scale is, and let's start out with the major scale, because every single scale, it always comes from the major scale. So everything is always some sort of derivation of the major scale. So let's play the C major scale. We're going to use this pattern here. We're going to start on the 8th fret of the low E string, and this is the C major scale. Contains the notes C, D, E, F, G, A, and B. If you start on the note A instead and play through those same 7 notes and you go A to A, that's the A natural minor scale. So A natural minor is a relative minor of C major. They share the same notes. So the harmonic minor scale just simply takes the natural minor scale and raises the 7th degree by 1/2 step. So instead of playing the A natural minor scale like this, you play the A harmonic minor scale like this. So that last note, that note G, is raised by 1/2 step. It's raised to a G sharp. So that note is, it's 1/2 step lower than the root. It's 1 whole step lower than the root in the natural minor scale. In the harmonic minor scale, it's 1/2 step lower than the root. So anywhere you see a white dot, you can always just, that harmonic minor note is 1/2 step before it. So it's only one note difference, but that one note difference is going to change a lot of stuff, as you're going to see in this lesson. Alright, so we're going to take a look at how these chords are created from these scales. So we're going to start off with the major scale and then see how you create the 7 in-key chords for the major scale that you're using. We're then going to do the same thing for the minor scale. We're then going to do the same thing for the harmonic minor scale. So we're just going to be looking at triads for now. Triads are 3 notes. And there's 4 types of possible triads. There's a major triad, there's a minor triad, there's a diminished triad, and there's an augmented triad. Within the context of a major key or a minor key, you have 3 that come out to be major, 3 that come out to be minor, and 1 that comes out to be a diminished triad. That is found in major keys, and that is found in natural minor keys. So let me show you what I'm talking about with that, and then we're going to do it for the harmonic minor scale. So take the C major scale, that's your 7 notes. So the way that you come up with your triads is you just pick one of the 7 notes. Each of those 7 notes represents the root of one of the 7 possible chords. And then you just simply play every other note until you have 3, and that's how you get your triads. So the first triad in the key of C major, looking at the C major scale, would be C, E, and G. The second triad would be starting on the second note, which is D, D, F, and A. The third one would be E, so E, G, and B. The fourth one is going to be F, F, A, and then you have to go back around to C. So you're just skipping every other note. So then you have G, so it's G, B, and D, and then A, C, and E, and then B, D, and F. So it's just you start on one of the 7 notes and you play every other note until you have 3, and that's how you get your triads that harmonize with that particular scale. So then once you have your triads, then you just kind of look at the relationship between those notes to see if it's a major triad, if it's a minor triad, if it's a diminished triad, or if it's an augmented triad. So as I said, in a major key or a minor key, there's only going to be major, minor, and diminished, so you don't have to worry about the augmented thing for now. So you just kind of look at the notes and see how they relate to each other. So the first one is C, E, and G. So let's find a C. Here's a C on the 3rd fret of the A string. And then here's an E, 7th fret of the A string. And then here's a G right here. So you can just kind of play that. So this right here tells you that it's a major of some sort, because it's 1, 2, 3, 4. If it's 4 frets apart, if it's that interval between the first and second note, otherwise known as the root and the third of the chord, it's telling you it's some sort of a major triad. So C, E, and G, that's a major triad. You then do the same thing for the next triad, D, F, and A. So find your note D here, 5th fret. Find the note F, 8th fret. Find the note A. Here's the 7th fret of the D string. So the spacing between the first and second notes, otherwise known as the root and the third, which in this case would be a minor third now, it's only 1, 2, 3 frets apart. So this spacing right here lets you know it's a minor triad of some sort. So major triad, minor triad. And then you do the same thing for the third chord. So E, G, B, minor triad, major triad. That spacing right there tells you it's a major of some sort. And then you do that for all the chords. And then once you get to the diminished one has a minor, the first and second note are a minor interval apart. But then the 5th is, instead of being a perfect 5th, it's a diminished 5th. So that has a specific sound too. So find your note B. You can use any B. You could use this B here, use this B here, this B here. It doesn't matter. Let's just go with this B. This one here, D, and F. So that's a diminished triad. So a minor third interval between the first and second note, or the root and the third, and then the diminished 5th interval is this. So that has a very distinct sound. So that's how you do this stuff. You just look at the 3 notes that are created from the scale. You then look at the relationship to see if it's a major or a minor type of triad. And then if the 5th, is also lowered by 1/2 step, that becomes a diminished triad. So root, minor third, diminished 5th, or flattened 5th is a diminished triad. So that's how that stuff works. If you then flip it around and you do the same exact thing for the minor key, so the relative minor of C major would be A minor, you're going to have the same exact stuff. The same exact 7 notes, the same chords are going to be created. 3 of the chords are going to be minor, 3 of the chords are going to be major, 1 of the chords is going to be that diminished triad, and it's the exact same stuff as the C major scale, it's just in a different order. So you come up with the chords the same way. You start on one of the 7 notes, you play every other note, A, C, E, B, D, F, C, E, G, D, F, A. You do the same thing. You find out that you have the exact same stuff that's in a major key. It's just now a minor key. the major perspective, the minor perspective. I talk about this stuff all the time. So that was basic music theory 101 stuff, but you needed to understand how to do that in order to do what we're going to do in this lesson, which essentially is the same thing, but we're just going to be doing it with the harmonic minor scale. So take a look at the notes of the harmonic minor scale. You have A, B, C, D, E, F, and G sharp. So we're now going to derive 7 chords using the same method. You start on one of the notes, you play every other note until you have 3. You then look at what type of triads are created. So by doing that, instead of having 3 major, 3 minor, 1 diminished like you do in a basic major or minor key, you now have 2 that are major, 2 that are minor, 2 that are diminished, and 1 that is augmented. So let's look at the augmented triad because we haven't talked about that yet. So the augmented triad, the 3rd chord that's found in the harmonic minor scale, is the note C, E, so that's a major 3rd interval right there, and then G sharp. So G sharp is a 5th that is raised by 1/2 step. You can also play it like this. So every time I hear that, I always think of Oh My Darling by the Beatles, because that song starts out with an augmented chord. So there's that, and then all the rest of them are ones that we've already talked about. So you have the major type of triad, the minor type of triad, diminished type of triad, and then the augmented type of triad now. So all 4 of these are found within this harmonic minor scale, and that's how you come up with it. You just find the notes doing the every other note method. You then, look at what type of triad is created, and then that's how you come up with this stuff. So let's just quickly walk through each of these 7 chords, or each of these 7 triads, and we'll play the triad followed by a possible chord shape that you could do in place of it. So the first one is an A minor triad. You can just play an A minor chord. The second one is a diminished triad. So it's hard to just play a diminished in the triad form. As we move further into this video, you'll see why, but I'm just going to play this for now. So first chord, second chord, and the 3rd chord is a augmented triad. You can play that like this. Your 4th chord is a minor triad. Your 5th chord is a major triad. Your 6th chord is major. And then your 7th chord is diminished. So diminished in form of triads is not always, diminished chords in general are just not always easy shapes to play, but that's just the triad form for each of those 7 possible chords. So if you just wanted to play a chord progression using triads in the harmonic minor scale, you can use those chords, and then you can write something in A harmonic minor. You can then solo over top of it with the A harmonic minor scale, and everything's going to sound creepy and dark and exotic and not like a regular major or minor scale. So that's triads. So now this is where things get really interesting. This is where we create 7th chords within the harmonic minor scale. So this is also the point where a lot of people will get very intimidated by theory. They see 7s and stuff in chord symbols, or they see 9s or 11s or flat 5s or whatever. They start seeing these numbers in chord symbols and they think, oh, too much for me. I don't understand music theory. And they don't even bother to try and even understand it. It's really not that hard. If you were able to follow along with the triad thing, 7th chords is just the same thing. You're just adding on a 4th note. So triads have 3 notes using the other note method. 7th chords have 4 notes using the other note method. So starting off with the basic C major scale, you start on the note C and you count every other note. So you have C, E, G, B. So that's your 4-note chord. That's a 7th chord. The next one would be you count every other note. D, F, A, C. And you just do the exact same thing, and then you just get 4-note chords for each of the 7 chords, and those are your 7th chords. Again, you just look at the relationships between the notes, the intervals within the notes, and that tells you what types of 7th chords were created within the scale. So there is 2 different types of 7ths. There's a 7th that falls 1/2 step lower than the root, and then there's a 7th that falls 1 whole step lower than the root. Those are the types of 7ths that you're going to find in a major key or a natural minor key. So looking at the C, E, and G, you have the major triad, and then that note B is 1/2 step lower than the root. So the type of 7th that is a major 7th. So a major 7th, M-A-J, 7, that always refers to the type of the 7th. That maj isn't referring to the quality of the chord. It's not letting you know that it's a C major chord. It's not letting you know it's a C minor chord. That maj is always referring to the type of 7th that it is. So 1/2 step lower than the root is a major 7th. 1 whole step lower than the root is just a 7th. All right, so you have C, E, and G. It's a major triad with a major 7th on there. So C major 7 chord. That's the Stranger Things theme tune, actually. So the second chord is, D, F, and A, but then you have this 4th note on there, so that's a C. So D, F, and A. That's a minor triad. And then the 4th note, which is a C, that falls 1 whole step lower than the root. So what type of 7th is that? It's not a major 7th, it's just a 7th. So D, F, and A with a C, which is 1 whole step lower than the root. That's a D minor 7th. There is such a thing as a minor major 7 chord, as you're going to see once we do this for the harmonic minor scale. But just understand that there's 2 different types of 7ths that we're dealing with. This is just a 7. This is not a major 7. This is just a 7 placed on top of a minor triad. So D minor 7th is this chord. The next chord you have E, G, and B. And then you have the 4th note added on there, which is the note D. That's 1 whole step lower than the root. So it's not a major 7, it's just a 7. So E minor, 7. You then have F, A, and C with an E on there. So F, A, and C is a major triad. The note E is 1/2 step lower than the note F. So that's a major 7 chord. So then the 5th chord is going to be G, B, D, and F. So G, B, and D, that's a major triad. And then F is 1 whole step lower than the root. So a whole step lower than the root type of 7th is not a major 7th, it's just a 7. So this is a G7 chord. Major triad, regular 7th, not a major 7th, regular 7th. So G, B, D, and then with this note added on there. So that's the type of chord that's created with that. That's the type of 7th chord. The next chord is an A minor 7 chord. The final chord is what is known as a half diminished chord. So let's look at that real quick. So B, D, and F, that's a diminished triad. And then we're adding the other note on there, that's an A. So the A is 1 whole step lower than the root. So B, D, and F is a diminished triad plus that regular 7th. Not a major 7th, just a regular 7th, which is a whole step lower than the root. That's called a half diminished chord. A half diminished chord has a diminished triad and then a regular 7th added onto it. So that's why it's called a B minor 7 with a flattened 5th. So that's what that chord symbol stands for. B minor 7 flat 5. So hopefully that makes sense. So the 7 is just a regular 7. It's not a major 7. It's just a regular 7. The triad is a minor triad, but it has a flat 5 in it. So when you see anything that's flat 5, that's a diminished of some sort. When you see this weird name, this B minor 7 flat 5 thing, you're going to see that a lot. That stands for half diminished. When we get to the harmonic minor scale next, you're going to see fully diminished chords in there too, and I'll explain what they are. So then if you just want to quickly do the same thing for the natural minor scale, the relative minor of C major is A minor. You look at the exact same chords, you're going to see that all of the same stuff is found in the A minor key, because A minor, C major, same key signature, same notes, same chords, major perspective, minor perspective. So again, you have the same seventh chords that are created. You have 3 of them that are minor seventh chords, 2 of them that are major seventh chords, 1 of them that is just a regular seventh chord, otherwise known as a dominant 7 chord. Dominant 7 is the same thing as just a seventh chord, so G7 or E7 or C7. Could also be called G dominant 7 or C dominant 7 or E dominant 7. So there's 1 of those in there, and then you have a half diminished chord. So the same stuff in A minor as in C major, the same holds true for any other relative major minor pair. So that's how you derive seventh chords within a major or minor key. Now let's do it for harmonic minor. Alright, so we're going to do the same thing for the harmonic minor scale. You just write out your 7 notes, you do the every other note method until you have 4 notes each. That's how you create your seventh chords that are found derived from the harmonic minor scale, otherwise known as the chords that harmonize with the harmonic minor scale. So the first one, you have A, C, E, and G sharp. So let's look at the interval relationship there. So A, C, and E. So that's a minor triad. And then you have G sharp. So let's actually do it down here. So here's A, here's C, here's E. And then G sharp is 1 half step lower than the root. So this is a minor triad with a major seventh added onto it. So that's a little weird. It's a minor major 7 chord. As I said, the maj is always referring to the type of seventh that it is. The maj is not referring to the triad. It's not referring to whether the triad's major or minor. It's letting you know that the seventh is 1 half step lower than the root. So the way that you could play that type of chord is you could do something like this. So that's going to be your A minor major 7 chord. So let's look at the next chord. You have a B, D, F, and A. So first look at the triad. So you have B, D, and F. So that's a diminished triad with an A. So that's just a regular 7. So that's a half diminished chord because it's a diminished triad with a regular 7 on there. Not a major 7, just a regular 7. So you could play that chord using this shape here. So that would be your second chord in this key, harmonic minor scale key. The third chord, C, E, G sharp. That's your augmented triad. And then you're going to have the note B in here. So that note B is 1 half step lower than the root. That's a major 7th interval. So that's going to be called an augmented major 7th chord. So you could play that like this. This is kind of a weird one to play. So, you know, you can just get away with just playing the triad for augmented chords. It doesn't really matter. Or you can throw in that major 7th. Either way, it's going to be part of the key. So it's a weird chord to play, but you know, that's the harmonic minor scale for you. It's got this weird exotic sound. So that's the third chord. The fourth chord is going to be just a basic minor 7th chord. So you have D, F, A, and then you have C. So the C is 1 whole step lower than the root. So minor triad with a regular 7th on there is a minor 7th chord. The next chord is going to be a dominant 7th chord. So you have a major triad, E, G sharp, and B. And then the next note is the note D. So that's 1 whole step lower than the root. So that's a 7. It's not a major 7, it's just a 7. So major triad plus a regular 7 makes a dominant chord. So E7. So you can play that like this. The next chord is F, A, C, and E, so major triad. The note E is 1/2 step lower than the root. So that is a F major 7 chord. All right, so that's your 6th chord. So the last chord is going to be what is known as a fully diminished chord now. So the 2 chord here, that is a half diminished chord, as I pointed out. So let's look at what a fully diminished chord is. So your notes are going to be G sharp, B, let's come down here actually, G sharp, B, and D, so that's a diminished triad, and then F. So here's the note F down here on the 1st fret. So that's 1, 2, 3. That's 1.5 steps lower than the root. So a major 7th is 1/2 step lower than the root. A regular 7th is 2/2 steps lower than the root. This is now 1.5 steps lower than the root. This is known as a double flatted 7th. So if you take a diminished triad plus a double flatted 7th, the result is a fully diminished chord. If you take a diminished triad plus just a regular 7th, which is only 1 whole step lower than the root, it's a half diminished chord. So what's the difference between diminished and half diminished? It's that 7th. Both contain a diminished triad, root minor 3rd, flat 5. But then if that 7th is a whole step below the root, it's a half diminished chord. If that 7th is 1.5 steps below the root, it's a fully diminished chord. So the way that I like to play diminished chords, I don't really like to play them rooted on the low E string. I usually play them rooted on the A string. So here's my note G sharp up here. So this is, that's going to be my diminished chord shape, fully diminished chord shape. If it was half diminished, it would look like this. Fully diminished, half diminished. So, as I said, these are all funky chord shapes. A lot of these things you may not be used to playing if you're only used to playing in major and minor keys. So the whole purpose of all this is to show you that you can now create chord progressions in the harmonic minor framework. You can do the same thing in the natural minor framework. You can do the same thing in any framework when you harmonize a scale like this. When you look at the notes of the scale and then figure out what chords are created from it, you can do that with any scale. So if I just wanted to write a chord progression in the key of A minor, I could play something like A minor to C to F major, then A minor to C to G major. So something like this. If I wanted to play those chords in the 7th form, that's fine. That's still all part of the key. You just have to play the right type of 7th chords. So A minor 7 to a C major 7 to an F major 7, A minor 7, C major 7, G dominant 7, so that's if I wanted to write a chord progression, you know, that's harmonized with the natural minor scale. I can then do the same thing, but I can do it with the harmonic minor scale. So just looking at the triads, the first triad would be still an A minor. The C would now be a C augmented. So A minor, C augmented, and then to an F major triad, and then A minor, C augmented, and then if we were to just play triads, you would have to play some sort of a G sharp triad. I always just like to play them like this: root, flat 5th, root. So, as I said, diminished chords, it's kind of hard to find shapes sometimes, which is why I prefer to play the diminished chords in their 7th form. So I'm going to get to that next. But anyway, so you see where I'm going with this. So if I wanted to now create that same chord progression, but using the full 7th chord form, my first chord could be either an A minor or an A minor major 7th. And then once I move to the C, it could be a C augmented, just in the triad form, or I could play, a C augmented major 7. once I get to the F chord, I could either play an F major chord or an F major 7 chord. And then once I get to the G, it's a G sharp chord now. So a G sharp chord, I like to play all my diminished shapes rooted on the A string. So I could, this is the G sharp diminished shape I would use. But go and review my lesson on the diminished chords, and you're going to see that fully diminished chords are what is known as symmetrical. So you can play the same shape every 3 frets apart, and it's going to be the exact same 4 notes. So rather than playing it up here, I could play it here, or I could play it here, or I could play it here. So that's a symmetrical shape. That's the cool thing about a fully diminished chord. The same applies to augmented chords. Check out that lesson for more on that. Anyway, so sometimes this stuff might be kind of hard to figure out. It might not be easy to spot these chord shapes right off the bat like you do for regular major and minor chords. But if you know the theory behind it, you can kind of put this stuff together. All right, so hopefully you guys like this lesson. That is writing chord progressions in the harmonic minor scale framework. It's a new set of chords from which you can use to write progressions with, write songs. If you're going for a creepy sound, if you're going for a dark sound, if you're going for like a horror movie type of sound, this is a good scale to use. In part 2, we're even going to go deeper into this. So if you liked what I talked about here, stay tuned for part 2. I think you're going to like that because we're even going to dive deeper. So thanks for watching.